Welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast, where your host, Josh Sweeney, will give you, the business leaders, HR professionals, and company culture aficionados, the knowledge you need to take your company culture to the next level.
Hello, my name is Josh Sweeney, and welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast. Before we get started, I would like to thank Prototype Prime. Prototype Prime is a technology co-working space in Peachtree Corners, Georgia. They have an amazing podcast room that they have helped us utilize in order to get this content out to you. So, thank you. Today, we're going to talk about personality assessments, behavior analytics, and some common uses for this type of information. So, to get started, let's talk a little bit about what they are, and then we'll dig into the details around the uses and what we see that typically happens with some of this information. So, when I talk about personality assessments, many of you have taken these before. So, they come across as Myers-Briggs assessments, DISC assessments, Brinkman, DNA behavior. There's all these different profiles and assessments that happen. And what we typically see that at a very high level, these end up being kind of a novelty item, right? Somebody at a party somewhere or company event or whatever it might be gives everybody this assessment. And they go take it and they read it and they determine that, oh, this is all like me and this is right on the money and that's great. And or they say, well, you know, it's 98% right. I don't believe what this or this section says. And then it basically disappears for there, never to be looked at again. So the first level is for these is this kind of novelty factor. They're fun to read. Now, the second thing we see that's common is for using them, HR departments use them, and they'll use them during the hiring process. So they'll look at these assessments and they'll read them and they'll say, okay, now we know more about that person. We know more about their personality type. And that's great, and then that information gets filed away. And unfortunately, you know, as an expert in this area, this kind of saddens me just a bit. The novelty's fun, and understanding who people are during the hiring process is great. But if those are the only two things that these are being used for, you're just not leveraging some extremely powerful information. And that's really what this podcast is about today is how do you leverage this information? What are some common ways to leverage it? Those common uses. With this information, I feel that it really demystifies human behavior. There was a Harvard study that said 87% of business issues are communication related. Well, how do you get to the bottom of that? Do you start communicating more? Do you start communicating better? What does that mean? We're dealing with human beings, right? Thinking, feeling, adapting people. Well, what we do is we use these behavior analytics to dig down into the communication in that perspective. We dig down in and we know how to communicate with this person because of their personality type. So, what are those common uses that I highlighted earlier? The first one is, as I mentioned, hiring. Now, I don't mean hiring in the sense of we send it to somebody, they take the test, we feel like we know more about them, and then it goes into their file. What should be happening with behavior assessments is you should be looking for, first of all, major incongruencies. Does the personality of this person, when you get their report or the hiring report or the other data that comes with it that tells you what job they were inherently built for, right, and built around as a person, does that job match them as a human? Does it match their personality type? What will happen is a lot of people can put up a facade for a certain period of time, meaning that maybe you're hiring somebody and they're in a desperate situation, they really need a job, they're going to take what they can get, they're good at talking, and they get in on a certain role. Now, let's say that that's a customer service role. They can probably work at that role for the next year and overcome whatever's needed because they're in a situation that requires that of them. However, if that doesn't match their personality type, then you're going to get into the year phase where this person's trained, you spend all the time and money with them, and they really should be hitting stride, and you should be retaining them to start getting real benefits in year 2 and 3 as an employee now that they're trained up, but they're going to leave, right? You found that their personality type is incongruent with the job role in that situation, and they exit. This happens a lot. So, when you're using this for hiring, you need to have enough information and enough knowledge around the personality assessment and how it fits the job role to make sure that there's not major incongruencies in that information, because it's going to lead to negative outcomes. The other thing you need to know is the personality traits of this person, just to make sure inside of that role, if it is a match, what are their tendencies going to be, and where will you need to work on them, or how can you put them in a place where they're working from a place of expertise and a place of where their natural behavior is going to come out in a positive way, because there's strengths and challenges, or strengths and struggles for everyone, and you really want them working within their strengths. So for the first common use, it's really diving down into the hiring and making sure that there's not major incongruencies in that role. The second common use that we utilize this information for is team performance. So when it comes to team performance, a lot of times it's broken down into 2 different issues that come up: trust and communication. First one is either you don't trust this person to get that job done, to execute on that task, and so there starts to become a breakdown from that perspective, or there is a communication issue, as we mentioned earlier. Now, the great thing about the assessment that we use and the assessments that are out there is they tell you how people would like to be communicated with. They tell you their typical mode of discussion. And the thing is if you're talking to somebody and you're not speaking to them in a way that they like from a communication style, then you could effectively be speaking another language to that person. You are effectively speaking Greek to somebody, and you think they're nodding their head, and you think they're coming along with it, but they're really not, right? And what you find is your communication style is different. And these assessments and analytics uncover that information. So one of the common ways that I like to give people as an example of this is email. Email is a thing that can really get off the rails quickly because you don't have any nuance, you don't have any tone or anything else in that email. Sometimes you can get it, right? But more often than not, it comes across more negative than you actually intended it to, and there's all these different things that happen in email. Now, in email, I'm going to get down into actually very tactical, nitty-gritty pieces of just duration. From a personality profile perspective, someone like myself likes what are called bullet point emails. I like lists. Josh, I think we should do this, this, or this, 1, 2, or 3. Which one sounds best? I'm going to respond with, here's why I think we should do number 2, and let's move forward. It's quick, it's bullet points, it's options, right? So those are the keys. Short, bulleted, options, decision, done. That's my emails. Now, there's other personality profiles that are naturally significantly more verbose. They're going to write very long, detail-oriented emails. And in those emails, they're gathering lots of data because their personality profile says, I need lots of information to make decisions. So they think you inherently need lots of information to make decisions, and that may or may not be the case. So when somebody sends me a very long email, let me just be a little vulnerable here and tell you what happens. It gets unread. It goes to the bottom of the list. I won't say it gets unread indefinitely, but if I have 100 emails to get through, it will be number 100 on my list, right? I actually, from a personality perspective, I have to be in a mindset to even embark on reading that email and not be distracted enough by everything else that's going on to get through it. So one, you're communicating to me in a style that's incongruent with mine, and I have to mentally prepare for that. And it works inversely as well. So then when I finally get to that email, you're going to get a fairly short answer. I'm going to answer the question at the end, and my response is going to be much shorter than yours, and that's going to come across as a negative as well. Most people that send long emails and get short ones back look at that long email and go, from a feeling perspective, they're like, man, I put all of this work into this email, I did all this research, I gave you all this data, and all I got was these 2 sentences back, right? It's just not the same. Well, the problem there is, one person's taking it as offensively, the other person's not meaning it that way, and it's really just an incongruency in the way that you communicate. So we use these as a way to get on the same page from a communication perspective. What are the ways that this person communicates, and what are the ways you communicate, and how do you come together? So when we do our team performance sessions, we actually go around and share some of these things so that we can uncover communication issues amongst teams. So that's the second way that this can be utilized. The third way is with job fit. Now this isn't hiring, right? Hiring is looking for incongruency with the job or congruency with the personality profile based on that job. Job fit is about moving people around. So job fit is when you have the right person in the wrong seat. You have an organization, you're like, that guy's a rock star, but I just don't feel like this is the right role for this person, this guy or girl, right? And when you're not in the right role, you're not getting the right productivity, you're not getting the right job satisfaction. So by running a behavior and personality test that includes a hiring report and hiring details, you're going to be able to understand, this person is in an outside sales role when really their personality is built much more for an inside sales role, and they would be an inside sales rock star. And that's not much of a difference in a couple of key personality traits, but it's a major difference in the productivity and the outcome and satisfaction in that job. So it gives you the ability to move people into the right space based on their personality and behavior and profile. The last one, and I've already talked about it on team performance, is around communication, but actually I'm going to take it to a different level. I'm going to talk about leadership communication. On a previous podcast, we talked a little bit about incentives. What we find is with incentives, this is one example of leadership communication, is that leadership is communicating some sort of incentive plan or some sort of messaging or strategy in a way that is incongruent with the team members that they have. Let me give you an example. If a leader is a fast-paced, goal-oriented person, they're typically going to talk in goals and numbers, and they're going to want you to go attack those goals and numbers. The challenge there is most of the other profiles that are in these assessments, goals and numbers don't resonate. So if half of the personality types are goal-oriented, the flip side of that in our assessment is relationship-oriented. They're much more about the relationship. So if you're only communicating in goals to somebody who only communicates in relationships, your message, your leadership communication and your messaging is not going to come across in a way that's going to get the outcome that you need. So, what I'd like to leave with you and have you think about is, if you are utilizing assessments already, you are utilizing personality assessments and then the deeper data, the behavior analytics around this, how are you leveraging that in hiring, team performance, job fit, as well as leadership communication? Because at the end of the day, if you are using this, you are already paying for that information, and we would like you to think about how you can utilize it in the best possible way to get your return on investment.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Epic Company Culture Podcast with Josh Sweeney. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. For additional content and transcripts, visit epicculture.co. If you have questions or topics you would like us to address or expand on, tweet us at epicculture1 or email at podcast@epicculture.co.